Mario Kart Wii is my personal favorite Mario Kart game of all time, right behind Mario Kart DS. If you grew up in the early 2000s and owned a Wii like I did, then hearing Mario Kart Wii is most likely more than enough to make you remember the days from when games like this were our only concern. My friends and I sunk thousands of hours into this game just like many other people, and today I'm going to be explaining this massive iceberg that I found on Iceberg charts. Created by Chill&Zero, this iceberg is one of the biggest ones I've seen for Mario Kart Wii, and this one in specific contains 9 different levels totaling to 190 entries. Literally everyone knows how these work already, but if you aren't aware, the iceberg format categorizes material from the most common to the most obscure material that there is. Most people should be familiar with a lot of topics near the top, but the further we go, the more interesting and obscure it will get. So let me stop yapping about that, because I think you get the idea, and let's get right into it. Ultra shortcuts. Throughout the 2 decades of the game's lifespan, players have managed to discover shortcuts that skip a vast majority of the track, as well as skipping key checkpoints, with these incredible skips being appropriately named the Ultra Shortcut. The most popular Ultra Shortcuts of all time are mainly for Rainbow Road, Grumble Volcano, and Mushroom Gorge, just to name 3. At the time of me writing this, only 16 of the 29 Ultra Shortcuts have managed to be done by humans in RTA. The other 13 are impossible to do legitimately, only being achievable with a task. The most important thing to understand about why these even work is that in order for the skip to work, it has to skip the track's first key checkpoint to go to the last key checkpoint, with more on the specifics of that oversight later in the video. There's only 3 tracks left without Ultra Shortcuts, being Toad's Factory, DS Delfino Square, and SNES Mario Circuit 3. It's possible that one day every track will have an Ultra Shortcut, and at this point, only time will tell. 2014 Wi-Fi shutdown. On May 20th, 2014, Nintendo announced that they would be officially shutting down the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection service, which was used by the DS, DSi, and of course the Wii. Following the shutdown, Nintendo would then reveal Mario Kart 8 in the coming days. This was a very sad day to say the least. Wheelies. If you're on a bike, pressing up on the D-pad while moving forward will make you do a wheelie, increasing your speed. Coconut Mall. Coconut Mall, Coconut Mall, Coconut Mall. This is most likely on here because of the various memes that surround this track, and the fact that it's also just an iconic track in and of itself. Drifting rework. Previous Mario Kart titles had a different method for charging up a mini turbo. It used to require the player to flick the control stick back and forth in a snake motion to build up a boost, but this was changed in Mario Kart Wii. Now in order to boost, you have to do a tight drift until you manage to build up a boost that way. TWD98. Also known as Troy, TWD98 is currently the largest Mario Kart Wii creator on YouTube. He's currently nearing 500,000 subscribers, and he's done some pretty influential stuff in the years that he's been around. Mario Kart Wii's obviously not the only Mario Kart that he plays, but he's still the most statistically well-known YouTuber who primarily makes content for mkwii. Oh, and he's also played Mario Kart with James Charles for some reason, so there's that too. More on that later. Vimfy. After the unfortunate death of Nintendo's official servers for the game, people now needed a new way to play the game online without it. Enter Wiimfi. Wiimfi, actually Vimfy, has been available to the public since May 10th, 2014, 10 days before Nintendo's shutdown, and is required to play Mario Kart Wii in the modern era. Funky Kong Flame Runner. Have you ever noticed how 99% of speedrunners use the same combo, Funky Kong and the Flame Runner? Well, the answer is very simple. It's the fastest and best combo in the game. Again though, more on that later. Same character glitch. It's possible for everyone on local play to play as the same character even if someone else is already using it. In order to do this, have each player select the character and then deselect it, and do this for every player. Go back to the previous menu, then go back in, and just like that, multiple people can play as the same character. POW dodge. If you press the trick button during a POW, you can avoid the spin out like this. Mr. Bean 35,000 VR. Mr. Bean 35,000 VR is considered by many to be the founding father of Mario Kart Wii. He's responsible for creating some custom tracks like Mushroom Peaks, Oh, and he also made CTGP Revolution, which is important, as we'll get to later. He honestly might be the most important figure when it comes to modernizing Mario Kart Wii. CTGP. CTGP is an acronym for Custom Track Grand Prix, which in itself is an unofficial mod to Mario Kart Wii that adds over 200 new tracks, being largely developed by Mr. Bean 35000 VR and Chatters primarily. The first version, 1.03, released in January 2014, and ever since then it has managed to become the mod to have if you want to play Mario Kart Wii in the modern era. The mod has new game modes, a 200cc engine class, customizable cup layouts, a personalized mod system, and so many other amazing things. And if you're interested in checking it out for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description for the mod. Galaxy Coliseum. Also being called the Galactic Coliseum, Circular Galaxy, and Galaxy Arena, the Galaxy Coliseum is a stage that only appeared in online tournaments of the game. With the arena size depending on the objective of the match, the map had 3 different main objectives. The main objective itself was to simply knock the spiky top men off the stage using mushrooms, with Phase 1 involving doing this with no other changes. In the second phase, the outer part of the track breaks off, and I don't know if I'm just dumb, but according to the Mario Wiki, Phase 3 seems to be the exact same as Phase 1. I would give my own input here, but I never actually had the luxury of playing this stage back when the Wii still had official support, so I can't speak for how it played. Due to Nintendo shutting down online services for the Wii, this map is not possible to play on anymore without methods like reinstating it with action replay codes, like in this footage I've been showing from Mr. Bean 35000 VR. If you'd like to restore its functionality again, you can do so with these codes for your respective region. Character stats. We all know that the characters, as well as their vehicles, have a vast amount of stats that change performance among other things, but actually looking at the stats gives me a little more appreciation for how specific some of the stats actually are. Most, if not all of them, are minimal stat changes, but just to give you an idea of how minimal some of them actually are, Wario's angular velocity while drifting manually is 0.000265, but drifting automatically changes this to then become 0.000222. Such an incredibly small number, but so interesting to think about, really. Also, since I know you're wondering this, the Flame Runner's speed is 51.5 miles an hour, 82.95 kilometers an hour, and Funky Kong has a vehicle weight increase value of 0, with a speed increase stat of 0.65 miles an hour, 1.06 kilometers an hour, and Funky Kong the Flame Runner has a normal and wheelie speed of 84 and 97 respectively. The numbers are different for every single character and vehicle class, and it's not often that people think about just how seemingly intricate and specific this stuff is internally. But this entry definitely makes me think about it, since I never thought of the mechanics being that well thought out. I guess seeing it flat out like this on sheets just makes me appreciate it way, way more. Inside drift. The sport bikes in the game have a very specific way of drifting. It's commonly referred to as inside drifting, and it's when you drift by committing to a turn instead of traditionally drifting like you would on a vehicle with 4 wheels. Inside drifting is obviously how you do a sharp turn on a bike in real life, so Nintendo did what they could to make a drift for the bike. And I think they did well. I don't really have to say this since you've done a drift on a bike before, but once you commit to the drift, you either cancel it and lose the drift entirely, or wait it out and build up a mini-turbo. Speed preservation. Speed preservation is one of the most important mechanics to Mario Kart Wii's insane tech. Aimed more towards competitive play, speed preservation is a concept limited to just the bikes in the game, and it has to do with maximizing efficiency on the track by combining multiple mechanics. Partially reiterating what Arkantel explained in his video about this, most new players might think that to reach the top speed, you have to accelerate back up to it with a wheelie, but the issue here is that the wheelie doesn't last forever. So once it's gone, your speed is drastically slowed down, now forcing the player to slowly get back up to it again. It also doesn't help that bikes like the Flame Runner and Mach Bike have very slow acceleration, which in turn is what makes preserving speed so important. This problem can be solved by combining the speed you get from a mini-turbo with a wheelie after it. Now you move much faster and preserve speed that you otherwise wouldn't have here, and doing this effectively can preserve an incredible amount of speed that is usually only done in competitive play. So pretty much all you have to do is wheelie on straights and inside drift on turns to get mini-turbos, right? Well, it's more complicated than that, but that strategy is a good starting point to getting really good at the game. The thing that makes speed preservation so difficult is that it requires a multitude of different techniques as well as a thorough understanding of how the game's movement works on a technical level. Things like aligning a wheelie in a straight and after turns, since even slightly turning during a wheelie loses an insane amount of speed, turning during a wheelie after a mini turbo or a mushroom since it doesn't slow you down, and general understanding of timing everything right will make you well on your way to being very quick and nimble on the track. Things I didn't mention in this explanation are things like refreshed wheelies, but I think you guys should hopefully get a well-explained idea of not only how much work goes into perfecting your movement, but also just how important speed preservation really is for competitive Mario Kart Wii. BAM Shock Dodge. The phrase BAM Shock Dodge originated from one of Troy's videos from August of 2011, where when dodging a shock he says, BAM Shock Dodge.
Well, for the sake of BAM Shock Dodge!
And ever since he coined this phrase, a lot of people say this throughout the community when dodging a shock. I mean, dude, he literally makes merch of it. I mean... Standstill Mini Turbo. Acceleration is obviously an important factor when it comes to competitively racing in a Mario Kart game, but what happens when you come to a dead stop with a heavy vehicle? Enter the Standstill Mini Turbo. By holding down both the drift and accelerator, you start to slowly form a mini turbo from a standstill. The sooner you release to boost, the better. Most vehicles in the game are light enough to where they don't necessarily require a standstill mini turbo to get back to speed, with the Mini Beast, Mach, Sprinter, and Wild Wing being the only light and midweight vehicles to benefit from the mini turbo. Everything in the heavy category except for the standard cart and bike, the Phantom, and the Wario bike require a standstill mini turbo to get any form of advantage from a complete stop. So for example, if I use the Flame Runner combo and start accelerating from a complete stop and compare this to a standstill mini turbo, the boost I get from the mini turbo is much faster. There are a few situations where this levels out and an SSMT isn't required, like the Sneakster bike with Mario, since Mario's acceleration stat of 2 evens the bike out to be perfectly even with a standstill mini turbo, but still. Controller options. This game gives you a lot of different ways to play. You can use the Wii Wheel, the Nunchuck, the GameCube controller, or Classic controller. Golden Wii Wheel. If a player manages to race at least 100 times, using the Wii Wheel at least 50% of the time, then the white wheel icon on your leaderboard card will change to be a golden Wii Wheel. Say that 3 times, Wii Wheel, Wii Wheel, Wii Wheel. 200cc. There's a very popular mod that implements a new 200cc mode from Mario Kart 8. Troy has made endless videos with 200cc, and it really is a great way to spice up gameplay, especially if you've never tried it. It allows for so much more insane skips and strategies, and I could watch the 200cc skips all day. Ultra Shortcut Revolution. On February 21st, 2021, Summoning Salt released Mario Kart Wii, the Ultra Shortcut Revolution. The video details the complete history of Ultra Shortcuts for every track up until when the video came out back in 2021. Everyone knows who Summoning Salt is, and it goes without saying that if you haven't seen the video, or any of his videos, then you need to go do that. I don't think he has a single video that isn't a great watch. Paratroopa. The Paratroopa was a playable character in Mario Kart Double Dash for the GameCube, but he was also initially planned for Mario Kart Wii as well. This unused icon from in the game files is very evident that he was originally going to be a character in Mario Kart Wii, but as we all know, that didn't end up happening. Also, while I'm at it, the next 2 entries here are for 2 other unused characters, being the Hammer Brother and the PD Piranha, with all 3 of these having their icons going unused in the game files, but nothing beyond that. The PD Piranha was also playable in Double Dash, but wouldn't show up again until the release of Mario Kart Tour. As for the Hammer Brother, he also wouldn't be introduced in any Mario Kart game until Mario Kart Tour. On February 27th, 2011, Japanese player KN uploaded a video demonstrating a skip in Rainbow Road and talking about its practicality in the description. Why is this important? Well, it has 27 million views. This is one of those videos that will just randomly show up in your recommended one day, and like everyone else, you're intrigued, and now you have to see what it is. If we're getting personal for a second, this video likes to show up in my recommended maybe once every 3 months? I don't know, but it does show up a lot in the span of 5 or so years. I personally don't rewatch this as a tradition, but all the power to the people who do. Mii Outfit C. Being directly evident by this icon being unused in the game files, apparently there was going to be a Mii Outfit C. The only thing left in the game for it is some leftover code from when they were going to add it. Other than that though, nothing. It is possible to make the button show up again in the game using gecko codes, but other than that we really don't know much. I've heard that it was going to look like Toad, but who knows. In this old cheat book I found on Reddit, it says that unlocking Mii Outfit C can be done by getting 15,000 points in Versus Mode. But what even is Versus Mode? More on that later. Minimap oddities. A lot of the collision models compared to the minimap have slight oddities due to them most likely being earlier versions of the tracks. So to go chronologically off the cutting room floor, parts of Mushroom Gorge's collision model has more polygons than in the minimap one, likely due to the versions. When comparing collision and minimap models of Toad's factory, the road section near the lake is shorter in the minimap. Viewing DK Summit shows that one of the curves are sharper in the minimap version, and it might be hard to tell, but key checkpoint 4 is also missing. This is the visual model for the bridge on Moonview Highway. And what does the collision model look like? It looks like this. Yeah. It's hard to tell, but this is the starting line on Moonview Highway. But by viewing the wireframe on the minimap model, there's a spot on the left that was meant for a lamp that was going to go behind the start line. And lastly, Rainbow Road. The double path section of the track is way steeper in the minimap version. There are some other oddities, like duplicate item boxes in Waluigi Stadium, and this really long invisible wall in Mario Raceway, but those are more general game oddities and not minimap ones. DK Summit boxes. There's a set of item boxes underneath Donkey Kong Summit that are completely impossible to reach. But by using a free movement cheat with ignored boundary checks, you can go under the course and get them. And they work! Kind of, but yeah, in case you were wondering, that is if you even knew, there you go. Mission Mode. Originally discovered by Mr. Bean 35000 VR in August of 2017, it turns out that there was actually going to be a mission mode planned for Mario Kart Wii. Mario Kart DS had this, having 63 missions in that game, but let's get into what Mr. Bean actually found. As for what's remaining from the mission mode in the game, well, not really much. The menu itself does load, but there's nothing there because it was completely erased from the disk. The game is trying to load the missions on this screen, but they're literally not there. There's a massive file that would have had all of the parameters to make the mission mode work, and the way Mr. Bean was able to get past that was by simply simulating the existence of the file. And surprisingly, he was actually able to play some of the games in the nearly completely removed mission state. The game mode included things like getting mini turbos to score points, item boxes for points, drifting for points, killing top men, kind of like from the Galaxy Coliseum, doing wheelies to score points, and killing enemies to score points. Those 5 are the only missions shown in the video, and the reason that nobody knew about this for so long is because the game doesn't even try to load the mission screens ever, at all. And it didn't even try to load them on the menus that originally had them on it either. But Mr. Bean got around this by, quote, simply convincing the game that it was meant to load them first, and then politely asked them to render, and it actually worked. Since then, this has been pretty much fully restored, as well as all of the menus and functionality that Nintendo had removed several years before. This would not have been possible without people like Mr. Bean, Atlas, Wexos, and Chatters, and probably even more people that I'm failing to mention. If it wasn't for them, this probably wouldn't have been found for a really long time. Airtime is slower. Airtime being slower is definitely obvious to most people, but by using the corner of this pipe in N64 Mario Raceway, this can very easily be demonstrated. Losing speed by being stuck in the air during a trick can waste a monumental amount of time, especially if you're in a competitive race or you're just doing a lap record. Whatever the case, it slows you down a lot. US and Europe differences. Mario Kart Wii has very slight differences throughout the 4 main versions of the game. If we were to get really specific here, these 2 pictures of the American and European versions are different. The American one uses a rights reserved symbol, with the European version using the trademark. The same thing is present on the title screen as well. Other than that though, there's not really much else. The most notable difference, also being highlighted by this entry, is the British English translation for DK Summit being called DK Snowboard Cross in the British English translations of the game. Soft drifting. Soft drifting is simply drifting in a way that doesn't make your stick reach its directional end. Used mostly in competitive play, this is important because you're charging a mini turbo just as fast as you would if you were drifting super tight, which makes cornering way faster on the track. Using a graphic from Arkintel's video on this, drifting from angles 42 to 126 takes around 70 frames, or around a second to build up a mini turbo. Anything below 42 can take well over double the time. The turning radius that you have coming out of the drift can also give you wildly different results. Soft drifting is most commonly practiced using the 45-degree notch and the right notch, and it's not really that difficult to start doing fairly consistently. The 45-degree angles is good, but if it's not what you're looking for, then the right notch is a harder but more rewarding method that gives wider results. Being called the half-stick method, this one is much harder as you're not relying on a degree notch on your controller anymore, and instead purely relying on your own personal feel on the stick, directly correlating to your own ability in-game to get good soft drift angles. A lot of players probably unknowingly do these soft drifts, not knowing about their niche importance in movement optimization, and according to Arkintel's video, a lot of people often stick with using the 45-degree method instead of going for the much harder version as it is, well, easier. Daisy Circuit Jump Scare. On July 18th, 2008, a player named David Philschool managed to discover a massive new ultra shortcut on Daisy Circuit. By lining yourself up just right on this ledge, it's actually possible to go right over the track. After this amazing discovery, it would take 13 years until people managed to find a real ultra shortcut for Daisy Circuit, with this task being released on July 1st, 2021. It's not likely that anyone will do this in RTA anytime soon due to the extremely precise wall clips, but the fact that this actually exists at all still blows my mind. At the time of me writing this, nobody has been able to do the skip in RTA. Mogi Lounge. Mogi Lounge is the main competitive scene for Mario Kart Wii. The website tracks players on a leaderboard ladder, tracking several different stats, and if you want to play competitive Mario Kart Wii, then this is the place to be. Most competitive people play on this, and they also have a ranking system going from Iron, Bronze, Silver, Gold, Platinum, Emerald, Ruby, Diamond, Master, and Grandmaster. Their Discord can also be found on screen if you're interested in joining the scene. Bagging. Bagging is a competitive playstyle that revolves around the idea of exploiting the game's item system to get better items. Everyone who's played Mario Kart knows about how the game gives you a chance to make a comeback the further back you are with better items, and this is exactly what gets taken advantage of. This usually happens at the beginning of a race, and if you've ever seen people not moving forward or even sometimes turning around, they're item bagging to get a crazy advantage later in the race. And just in case this entry isn't referring to the strategy, the other meaning of bagging is where players will do the same thing, but to specifically get the shock instead of any other power-up. This is most commonly done on tracks that have really powerful skips, with the most common regular tracks to bag on being Dry Dry Desert, Yoshi Circuit, and Mario Circuit 3. But those are just some examples. Melee of Mario Kart. Mario Kart Wii is widely regarded by the community as being the Melee of Mario Kart. The reason for this has to do with how the mechanics are widely considered to be competitive friendly, and also how the item system is more predictable since it's not based on the distance from first place, and rather based on your placement. The other big reason is that Mario Kart Wii is also considered to be the ultimate, most objectively timeless Mario Kart title, and has managed to stand the test of time better than all of the rest. And if you want my opinion, someone who doesn't play competitive, Mario Kart Wii is without a doubt the best Mario Kart game. Fight me in the comments. Spin drifting. Spin drifting is another one of those very technical movement optimizations, but this time it's for primarily the beginning of a race. By performing a spin drift, it allows you to drift in one direction while making the player hop towards the other direction. Doing this can help make tighter turns around walls and can also help towards hopping for longer distances in a race. This only works with inside drift vehicles, so no karts, and in this footage by Ninbuzz, his alignment is going right into the wall, but when he does a spin drift here by drifting to the left and then immediately moving it back to the right, and then moving it left again, he's able to clear the wall and get a super sharp turn as a result. This is what it looks like with a controller cam. Spin drifting in certain situations can benefit your alignment with the track, with these examples being for the Mushroom Gorge gap jump, N64 Bowser's Castle, and the jump on DK Summit, just to name 3 examples. Respawn boost. Pressing A when you land after respawning will give you a boost. Lightweights are bad. The source listed for this entry takes me to a Reddit post that has since been deleted, so there's no way to know what was being said, but judging by the comments on the post, it seemed to have been a now deleted video of something, I don't know. My best guess is that it was most likely a clip of something being made into a good example as to why lightweights in this game are inferior. Really don't know what else it would be. Mii track differences. Just like with normal characters, the Miis are also separated into 3 different weight classes, being small, medium, and large. The class type directly depends on the weight and height of the Mii, with the most important factor here being the height. Delay drifting. This is a very subtle movement strat, and when compared to instant drifting in this footage from Troy, the difference is actually pretty massive. To perform a delay drift, you have to press the drift button and wait to turn with your stick only until you actually hit the ground. This is really easy to get the hang of on tracks with flat surfaces like Bowser Castle 3, and you'll know you're doing it right when your bike starts to drift when it lands. The reason delay drifting is faster is because it gives you more space to charge a mini turbo, which also gives you the chance to boost at a more optimal time, and in straight lines gives you a longer wheelie time as well. And as opposed to instant drifting, which is slower and less effective, this adds up fast over time. This is such an effective strategy because when doing instant drifts, you're covering distance in the air when you jump, but it's not charging a mini turbo. You're not turning in the air with a delay drift, which in turn makes it much quicker to charge up a boost when you hit the ground. Also, this is harder to do on curved surfaces, or really anything that alters your air time when you jump. Another important distinction that needs to be made about delay drifting is that it's not always an effective strategy. Sharp turns that don't give you enough time to do perfect delay drifts are simply not optimal here and are not needed. This turn on Bowser Castle 3 is a perfect example. A very subtle thing, but over time can be greatly optimized for even faster performance on the track. Off-road glitch. On Mushroom Gorge, there's a pretty well-known bug that lets you drive around in the grass and other areas that usually slow you down, but don't. So why does this happen? Well, it has to do with the way the ramps are programmed in on the track. The ramps right before the mushrooms on this track have a very special property that actually locks the speed of your character. The most agreed reasoning for this is that Nintendo most likely made it this way to make the jumps more consistent and make you land more in the center of the mushrooms instead of the outer parts. Once you land on the mushrooms from the ramp, it unlocks your speed and you're able to drive normally again. Triggering this glitch is as easy as hitting the ramp backwards, and this is used pretty much all the time in competitive as it gives you a big advantage and also makes your character unfazed by things like the shock. Last thing about this glitch is that it only happens on Mushroom Gorge because the way that this is programmed in is that it only happens with those specific mushrooms which are inclusive to that track and no others. American flag. There's an unused graphic of an American flag that is found inside of a file called channel.szs. It's named tt_america.tpl, and there is one interesting thing about it. According to the cutting room floor, the layout file for every player's entry in the top 10 list references this icon specifically as a placeholder for the pictures of the country flags. It can't be seen in the game though, because it's replaced with the flag icons that are actually used. Coconut Mall Boost Gradient. In every single track in the game, this red, yellow, pinkish gradient is present on every boost pad. Something you might not have realized though is that Coconut Mall is the only track in the game to have a rainbow gradient on the boost panel instead of the other one. It's actually likely that it might have been a leftover from earlier builds of the game, since many of the beta courses use the rainbow pattern on their boost panels too. Draw_demo. This is probably going to kill the bitrate on the screen, but draw_demo.szs is an unused course on the Mario Kart Wii disc. It was most likely a track used to test the rendering engine, and the course itself is the exact same as Mario Circuit, and the reason that it looks the way it does is because the textures that the code is telling to load are slightly missing. The other things that are missing are the lap checkpoints, item boxes, no intros or any cutscenes, the ramp and the chain chomp are gone, and the CPU routes aren't present either. 4 GCN Mario circuits. Aside from draw_demo, the game files contain 4 more unused versions of Mario Circuit. The first one is called Old Mario GCB, and this one is almost exactly the same as the final, with the only differences here being that the course is rotated 180 degrees compared to the finished one. It's thought that the reason for this is to orient the map in the same way as Mario Kart Double Dash, since it's also thought that this copy of Mario Circuit might be a direct port of the map's data from that game, and the collision is also vastly different compared to the final versions as well. The second one is called Old Mario GC Hayashi, and this one is named after Yugo Hayashi from Mario Kart Wii's planning team. This one is the same as the others so far, but there are very minor changes to things like the collision, like these 2 added trunks for the trees, and some of the parameters to things like the track's starting position is also slightly different too. This version also has 41 checkpoints, which is way higher than the final version's 31. There's also changes to the cameras, camera activators, and really any other thing that comes with porting the map to a new engine, assuming it was actually ported from Double Dash. The third Mario circuit, being Old Mario GC Narita, is named after Minoru Narita, also from the planning team. This one is also rotated 180 degrees. Its starting position is very similar, albeit rotated 180 degrees on the y-axis. And surprisingly, this version has less checkpoints than the final with 27. Not much else aside from the unmentioned specificities. And last but not least, we have Old Mario GC Yabuki, named after Kazuki Yabuki, once again from the planning team. This map has every similarity as the last, but the checkpoints, oh my god. I'm gonna let you guys guess. Leave it down in the comments. Ready? Okay. This version has 61 checkpoints, 30 more than the final version's measly 31. There is something more interesting than that though, and it's that since everything in this track is indexed in reverse, the track is by extension driven on backwards. It's not known if it was intentional or not, but pretty cool. Mecha Koopa and Cloud Bikes. In some of the concept art for the bikes that were made probably before anything was programmed, it shows designs for a Mecha Koopa bike as well as a Cloud Bike. They were both scrapped, with their translated names being called the Mecha Koopa DX and the Sky Twister. Early vehicle colors. In this concept art, on the left is a picture of a Mii in a racing outfit. The concept shows that it has 2 colors, red and blue, and it kinda looks like outfit A, but it's not. Perhaps we would have had more color choices with our Mii outfits. Lap count beyond 3. In a now scrapped mechanic, there was actually a planned feature to be able to do more than 3 laps in a race. There's actually a graphic in the game files for additional Lakitu signs that go through every number except for 1. And you can still do this by using hacks or just by using the lap and speed modifier on CTGP. Concept art tracks. There's 2 concept art panels that were made for Luigi Circuit and Dry Ruins. The early art for Luigi Circuit is really cool, and it shows things that never made it into the game, like the Cheep and Blooper blimps. The Dry Ruins one is really different from the finished track, and they plan to put Mii heads on a lot of the different things like the Sphinx and other ancient artwork, and parts like the Oasis on the track were supposed to be way bigger. There is still a Mii head on the Sphinx in the finished track, but the artwork itself along with all of the concept art is really cool to go through and look at. Horizontal walls. Horizontal walls are a legendary glitch that makes skips like this not impossible. All a horizontal wall is literally just a wall that's facing upwards on the ground that acts like a floor. But the weird thing about them is that after you touch a horizontal wall, you're able to clip through walls temporarily. According to my own research, it's still not exactly known why this happens, but nevertheless it makes for some mind-blowing skips in the game. Since it's referred to as a glitch in the game, I'm guessing that this glitch is the result of an oversight in the programming. Quacker is the best vehicle. If you don't have much knowledge about the record history done with this kart, then you might be surprised to find out that it's actually one of the best karts in the game. The kart currently holds 3 world records on Mushroom Gorge, Grumble Volcano, and Rainbow Road. It has the highest stat total of any vehicle, being 343, and if compared with Toad, it has the highest acceleration And even better, combined with Baby Peach, it has the highest stat total of any combo in the game as well. This entry does hold a little bit of truth to the idea that the Quacker is the best vehicle, but it's also a little misleading as it's only that good in certain situations. That and the fact that this has also been a myth in the community before. But you know what? This game still has a lot of history left to it, so anything is possible, so I'm just gonna shut up. Off-roader flag differences. When comparing an early version of the off-roader kart compared to the finished version, a couple of things were changed. The first and most obvious one is that there wasn't a flag in the original, hence the name of the entry. It also doesn't originally have a back tire, the back of the seat was larger with a smaller character emblem, and the spikes on the wheels used to be longer. Also, the flag itself will change based on what character you're using. YouTube soundtrack wipeout. At the start of 2022, Gilvasunner, who was a channel that uploaded video game soundtracks, received over 1,300 copyright blocks from Nintendo, and then later received another 2,200 more. This, of course, included his uploads of the Mario Kart Wii soundtrack, which had been up ever since June of 2011 to right up to when Nintendo nuked his channel. These uploads had many millions of views, and with Nintendo literally giving him over 3,000 copyright blocks, this would eventually lead to Gilvasunner deleting his entire channel. The soundtrack has obviously been re-uploaded as there's really no way for Nintendo to ever win since all of the files can easily be ripped from the game, but yeah. It's been 2 years since Nintendo did this, and I still hate them for it. Vimfy mentioned on Wikipedia article. In the Wikipedia article for the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection, at the very bottom of the page is a direct mentioning on the community replacement, which is Vimfy. Also, I know I said this earlier in the video, but it's apparently pronounced Vimfy because of its creator being German. Mario Kart X. With the ending of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Mario Kart Tour, at the time of me writing this video, many people around the community are anxiously awaiting the release of the 10th main Mario Kart title in the series. There's a lot of speculation going on right now, but with the game reportedly being called Mario Kart X due to information about it apparently being leaked in November of last year, the game is apparently set to come out at some point in 2025. The hype that's building up for this game is pretty intense, and I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't kind of excited to see what they're going to do with this game. The biggest things that people seem to want are an outstanding character selection, a perfect retro track lineup, a mission mode, and the hopes are really high considering that this is apparently going to be one of the most expensive games Nintendo will ever produce. And until anything does get leaked or officially shown off, we really don't have any other choice but to speculate how good it's actually going to be. What do you think should be in Mario Kart X? I, for one, hope it includes a remake of Airship Fortress from Mario Kart DS, aka the best track ever, but whatever they end up doing, I sure hope it satisfies all of our expectations. Mario Kart Emporium is real. Airing at some point in mid-2008, 3 different commercials were made for Mario Kart Wii that included the likes of Cowboy Jed, as well as the Mario Kart Emporium. The most memorable thing about this commercial is the catchphrase, "Just look at the footage!" as well as really the whole thing, but people have apparently speculated that the Emporium in the background behind him is real. Okay, that's a joke, but there is something interesting about Cowboy Jed. Absolute descent into insanity throughout the 3 commercials aside, the guy in the commercial playing him is completely unknown. That is, it was, because recently people managed to find out that it was actually a guy named Gibson Nault, a now really successful real estate representative in Australia. He also acted in Ghost Rider, with Nicolas Cage, but you might have missed him since he was managing camera and electrical equipment for the film. Bob-omb hitbox size. Compared to other Mario Kart games, the Bob-omb in Mario Kart Wii is really big. To the 99% of people watching that have been hit by one, then you know what I'm talking about. I wanted to try and get an exact hitbox comparison here, but I unfortunately have no way of getting a hitbox monitor on my game. Rapid Fire Hop Abuse. Rapid Fire Hop Abuse is one of the weirdest glitches in Mario Kart Wii. Also called the Super Grind, Rapid Fire Hop Abuse consists of pressing the drift button for 1 frame, then waiting 1 frame, and then doing it again in a cycle until you approach a change in the slopes on the ground. It's basically like getting stuck in the ground, and the trick can be used to get as little airtime as possible on things like ramps. The trick was discovered by Tasser and Mark in the summer of 2013, and it has since been used to shave off significant amounts of time in tool-assisted speedruns. The glitch itself is reserving momentum that you have before you start doing the super grind. It took a long time for people to understand how this glitch works in the way that it does, and in certain tracks like Luigi's Circuit, it is absolutely overpowered. It should go without saying that perfect super grinding is almost not worth doing in RTA due to the very precise way you perform the glitch. But this is a different story for tool-assisted runs, and while it's obviously not an impossible trick to perform, its difficulty is definitely a barrier for the current people who speedrun the game. Double Dash reused assets. The player models from Mario Kart Double Dash were reused for Mario Kart Wii, obviously excluding the characters that were either scrapped or not used like the PD Piranha and the Paratroopa. With the way that they were implementing Mario Circuit from earlier in the video, it doesn't surprise me that they'd reuse the already existing models too. They did touch-ups on some things of course, but this also sparks the discussion of, does Double Dash actually look better than the Wii version? I would say that it does, but only in certain ways. Double Dash doesn't have that hazy filter that the Wii version does, which makes the game visually look a lot more clear than the Wii version's bloomy looking environment due to the filters that are added on top of everything in post, but really it's just personal preference. I prefer Mario Kart Wii. Peach Beach sub 1 minute. Unless new strategies are discovered, the Peach Beach 3-lap record is going to be the last sub-minute barrier that will ever happen in Mario Kart Wii. Being broken in September of 2022 by Rafguy, coming in at a time of 59.978 seconds, this record was out of nowhere and absolutely unexpected by both him and the community. This run requires perfect execution of not only the wall clip, but also the driving itself needs to be really precise. This is such a big deal for the community for being the last sub-minute barrier record, and for now it still is the last sub-minute barrier that has been broken since this world record almost 2 years ago now. The previous world record was achieved 2 years earlier by a player named Arrow, with a time of 1 minute and 49 milliseconds, and it stood for over 2 years, and probably would have stood longer if Raph hadn't come back to the game to try and get it back. Bowser Castle theme is Maple Treeway slowed down. The music for Bowser's Castle and Maple Treeway both have the exact same melody. You might not have ever noticed though, since for the Bowser's Castle theme, the melody is transposed to a minor key from a major key, and some notes in the rises and falls are removed to give the music a completely different feel. This was actually a rumor for a long time, but it wasn't ever put to the test until quite recently. Have a listen for yourself. Lakitu can be squished. Lakitu can actually be crushed by thwomps if you manage to put him right underneath them. Miis at Coconut Mall were killed. In Mario Kart 8, all of the Miis seem to have not returned to this game's rendition of Coconut Mall. Where did they go? Perhaps they were tired of everything that was going on there, or perhaps they were killed. Peaks controversy. Mushroom Peaks was the first original custom track ever put onto CTGP back in December of 2009. And for the 15 or so years that it's been out, it hasn't really aged very well. The main critique for the track is that it's just kind of poorly designed because of how old it is. A lot of players really want the track removed, but since it's the most popular track on CTGP, it still has yet to be removed at the time of me making this video. But what makes this map so poorly designed? Well, hills like this are bumpy and awkward, and parts like this are designed with such confusion to people who don't know that the path on the right here is actually a shortcut, with the left path actually being the main one. That's pretty misleading. The issue here isn't even the section itself, but actually that the mushrooms are just not very well made for situations like this either. You really have to hit the mushrooms at just the right spot, and the biggest complaint I see here is that the main path is just way too hard too. Other negative opinions come from how the map is just kind of boring. It's a very rigid and straightforward map with a lot of flat sections. Not the most exciting thing in the world. But the next complaint is the last jump. You're meant to make a left turn off of it, But again, it's not really well implied since there's no indicators or anything that points towards that being what you have to do to land after the jump. All in all though, this map just kind of suffers from how primitive and old it is now. That and that the map is long, frustrating, and overall just counterintuitive. But what do you think? Am I wrong? Let me know what you think. Special Cup Carpet. Something that very few people notice when playing Bowser's Castle is that the floor on the rotating part of the track actually says Special Cup on the carpet. I always knew that something was there, but I never stopped to actually see what it was. Unsurprising, but still pretty interesting nevertheless. Mario Says SpongeBob. On June 5th, 2011, somebody by the name of Vector Chaotix1 would upload one of the most influential Mario Kart videos of all time. Simply titled, Mario Says SpongeBob, the video consists of a clip of Mario sounding like he says exactly that. Take a listen. Doesn't it sound like he says SpongeBob? Discuss. No, but really though, this video is a legendary meme in the Mario Kart community, and wherever the guy who uploaded it is right now, I hope he's doing well. Mushroom Gorge Gap Jump in Mario Kart 8. A lot of people predicted that this gap jump in Mushroom Gorge is impossible to do in Mario Kart 8. And so, in August of 2022, Troy decided to see if those people were right. And it is. Bumpfest. In December of 2010, a player named 4 and a lot of other players decided to mess around and bump into each other until they eventually got bored and stopped. But that wouldn't be for a long time, because just look at how much fun this is. The iconic video is called Bumpfest, and some of the things they managed to do in 2010 are kinda crazy, like how they managed to get onto the island in DK Jungle Parkway, or how they managed to land on the other side of the track multiple times by bouncing off the ferry. They also did the same thing on Sherbert Land, and this video itself is another iconic one from back in the day. Controller Wars. Ever since the game came out, people have always went back and forth about what controller is the best in the game. Some think it's the wheel, some think it's the nunchuck, and some think it's the classic controller, but I think we all know what the best controller actually is. Mach Bike Viability. Even though the Mach Bike is considered to be the second best vehicle in the game, it still pales in comparison to the Flame Runner. Obviously top players would prefer to use the Flame Runner, and some top players even go as far as saying that the Mach Bike is straight up not viable. Though as of recent, I have seen a resurgence of the Mach Bike with Daisy, so who knows, this game still has so much history behind it, so let's just all stop talking. Drifting the wrong way. I'm not gonna lie, this entry kind of sounds like a skill issue. It has to do with how sometimes Mario Kart Wii controllers decide to have a mind of their own, and I guess they drift the wrong way? Maybe I'm biased since I took pretty good care of my controllers, but I personally never dealt with something like that. I will say though, I have accidentally drifted the wrong way, and I'm pretty sure that that is exactly what this entry is talking about, so yeah. It's not unreasonable, it happens to me all the time because I'm bad. Mii's Face the Camera. After you finish a race, the only characters that look right at the camera are the Miis. No other character does this, it's only the Miis. Chain Chomp and Honeycoop. In the textures for Wario's Honeycoop vehicle, there's a no Chain Chomp sign in it, with another texture of a Chain Chomp eye. Why? That's a good question. The best guess is that maybe an earlier version of the vehicle had a Chain Chomp themed design, but who knows. DK Feet texture. In the character selection screen's Donkey Kong, you might notice something weird about his feet. By zooming in on this, people had no idea what it was meant to be. Turns out though that this is actually the result of a texture mapping issue that accidentally applied Donkey Kong's mouth texture onto his feet. DK Summit Area. There's invisible areas in Mario Kart Wii that act as pointers so that the game knows which cameras to use for replays and things like that. But when viewing DK Summit's area boxes, there's a really, really big one. Like, way bigger than the track. It's thought that it could be for clearing the fog, but other than that idea, nobody knows why it's that big or what its purpose is. Selection screen and gameplay texture differences. Aside from things like the Donkey Kong feet oversight, there are still a couple of other differences in the selection screen textures that differ from the gameplay ones. There's not a lot of them, but the first one comes from Drybone's standard Kart S. It's hard to see, but in the vehicle selection version, there's a white line in the bottom middle instead of the black line in the gameplay version. There's also changes to the line pattern in the top right of the texture as well. And aside from the Donkey Kong thing though, that's kind of everything I can find. Not much changed in the textures after that. DK Mountain Missing Transition. Now, when I first read Missing Transition, I thought it might have been something related to a video, but it actually has to do with this spot on the track. You see, when they ported this track into the Wii version from Double Dash, the transition between these two pathways for some reason just didn't get transferred over with the rest of the track. The reason this has no fade here is because the vertex colors that made the transition up are just not there. This is made even more odd since the vertex coloring is the exact same as the Double Dash version, so this might have been an intentional decision from the devs. 95% rule. The 95% rule is a programming implementation that was meant to assure that you aren't able to skip any major parts of the tracks. The thinking was that if the devs put in a handful of important checkpoints that you're meant to reach, it would make it so that you can't skip anything, right? Well, here's the thing. Mario Kart Wii loads 3 key checkpoints at any given time. The one you last touched, the one in front of it, and the one behind it. So if you went out of bounds and drove back to the last checkpoint, the game would do one of two things. It would either assume that you reversed, or it would assume that you did a lap. Skipping the normal checkpoints will still count your lap, but if you try to skip a key checkpoint, which are in green, it won't count your lap. So how do we get around this? Well, here's what makes all of these ultra shortcuts possible. So on this map of Sherbert Land, this region right here is key checkpoint 0. In this spot, the other loaded checkpoints are key checkpoint 1 and the key checkpoint behind 0, which is the last key checkpoint. So if you could manage to somehow reach the last key checkpoint back behind the starting line and then drive past the starting line, it would count as a lap. And that's exactly what is happening in these ultra shortcuts. They're reaching the last key checkpoint on the course since it's loaded, and since the game doesn't know that you're doing an ultra shortcut, it assumes you did a normal lap. It really is a miracle it was programmed this way. If the devs did anything differently to the checkpoint system, none of this would even be possible. Grumble Volcano's checkpoint map makes it even easier to understand why this works and counts as a lap. These checkpoints are different for every track, some of them possible, some of them not, but that is the basic rundown of this programming rule. Desert Hills Backwards Shortcut. Speaking of shortcuts, this skip on DS Desert Hills is a pretty interesting skip that was theorized as a potential ultra shortcut a couple of years ago. It was only deemed viable in online, and when it was first demonstrated, it really wasn't that optimized. The skip involves activating certain checkpoints by riding the wall beside the finish line and then dying on purpose and turning around to touch the now loaded checkpoint halfway behind the track. Fortunately though, almost 2 years later, this ultra shortcut was found for the track, making at the time the 3rd year in a row that 3 ultra shortcuts were discovered in 1 year. Cut Boo Item. On page 42 of volume 227 of Nintendo Power, the item list for Mario Kart Wii mentions something called the Boo. As for the item itself, it definitely would have had the same behavior as the one in Mario Kart DS, but as for the item in the Wii version, well, it has no traces anywhere in the files anymore. The only trace of it is an empty item slot in the code, so it probably was there, but obviously it was removed. It was eventually brought back in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe though. Stats on selection screen are wrong. A lot of stats on the character selection screen are just kind of wrong. The bars of different stats that get displayed are kind of just a vague prediction compared to what the stats actually are like with the character combinations. I mean, can you really blame them for it though? Like, imagine if the stats beside the character displayed a bunch of different super specific numbers instead of just going with visual bars. It's just a lot cleaner on the UI, and while it is wrong, I can definitely see why Nintendo didn't do this on the screen beside it. And if the entry doesn't refer to this, then I'm sure it's talking about how some of the characters just have incorrect bars. Dutch translation. The only language of the 6 languages in the Wii menu that isn't available in Mario Kart Wii is Dutch. If you play the game with your Wii language set to Dutch, everything on the Wii's operating system will be in it, except for Mario Kart Wii, which will be in English. The code for the language is still there, but goes unused for whatever reason Nintendo had to get rid of Dutch. Ending Red Pipe. In the Sunset version of Luigi's Circuit, some of the pipes are red. Mario Raceway Invisible Wall. This was briefly mentioned earlier when talking about the game's oddities, but yeah. Mario Raceway has an invisible wall at this turn here that is really long for some reason. Maybe they don't want you to cut this corner? I don't know. Beta textures in base game. There's actually quite a lot of beta stuff that Nintendo never removed from the final version of the game. So let's start with characters. Rosalina's early model has slightly different shading, and less noticeable, she initially had shorter arms. It's thought that the early model was ported from Peach and Daisy's biker outfits, as it's the exact same case with them too. Bowser got very slight adjustments to his model, getting rid of dark shading around the arms, and the interior shell, and even the spikes. This model is actually still used in certain parts of the game, like in the award ceremony cutscene. Drybones has the same situation as Bowser, with his model originally having dark shading around his shell interior and limbs. The early model is also still used in multiplayer. These are just 3 examples of early content that does get used in the final game, but there is quite a lot more than that just remains in the game files as unused content. The cutting room floor documents everything that's unused, and I highly recommend checking them out to see more. POW Hop Dodge. It's possible to dodge the POW spin out if you press the jump button during a POW. Well-known mechanic, but very effective in gameplay. Though the hop dodge in this entry is actually referring to how you can hop on a frame-perfect timing and skip it that way too. Special Ghosts. Also known as Expert Staff Ghosts, these ghosts have really good times that were set by the developers in time trials. You have to beat the normal staff ghosts by sometimes almost 10 seconds in order to unlock the expert ones. And beating the expert ones gives you a lot of good unlocks, like Funky Kong, which is unlocked by unlocking 4 of the expert ghosts. Players have obviously gotten a whole lot better since the days that these were considered amazing times, but to some, they will definitely still be difficult. Going in Rainbow Road's cannon backwards. What happens if you go inside Rainbow Road's cannon in reverse? Well, let's find out. It actually works! Well, with no clip, but... Ramps are unbelievably complicated. The ramps in Mario Kart Wii are so much more complicated than anyone could ever imagine. The ramps are generally divided into 6 categories, with the first being bumper ramps, flat ramps, fall-off ramps, side ramps, high ramps, and rapid-fire hopping abuse, which I've already talked about and is TAS only. So let's start with bumper ramps. Ramps like these ones on Bowser Castle 3, Ghost Valley 2, and Shy Guy Beach are just some of the examples. The best way to approach these is by jumping before you touch the ramp, and if done correctly, then you'll clip the ramp a little bit, and this not only levels out your kart, but it also kills any Y velocity you had before the jump, which in turn makes you touch the ground really fast. These jumps are also all about jumping up to the ramp, and this example by Arkintel is a good demonstration of that. Now let's talk about flat ramps. Also referred to as clip ramps, these ramps revolve around trying to hit the furthest point possible while still hitting a trick. These also aren't limited to literally flat ramps, as the principle still applies to jumps like these on Coconut Mall. Next we have what are called fall-off ramps. Also known as alignment ramps, fall-off ramps have a property that give you less airtime if driven off the sides of the ramp itself. These ramps rely most on your alignment rather than actually hitting a trick on them. And these ramps on Moo Moo Meadows, Coconut Mall, and Rainbow Road are all examples. Next we have side ramps. These are the most self-explanatory ones so far, as they're really just sidewalls like these ones in Moonview Highway. They're not far off from flat ramps as they also rely on alignment, but they're still in a separate category regardless. Examples include the ones in Moonview Highway and Rainbow Road. And lastly, we have what are called wall cancels. These ramps are situational in that sometimes it's faster to hit a wall that forces the character to go downwards that ends up being faster compared to just jumping off the ramps normally. This one on Waluigi Stadium is a really good example of a wall cancel. There's most likely newer categories and things that have probably moved around since it was initially categorized, but it really goes to show just how complicated the ramps actually are in the game. HD Chinese release. 10 years after the game's release in 2008, in 2018, a Chinese HD version of the game was announced to be released on a console called the Nvidia Shield. The game was able to run in 1080p, the original was 480p, and it featured online modes and different technical capabilities that was seriously exciting back when it was coming out. But unfortunately for this version, it never came out due to the developers never hearing back from the Chinese government after they asked them to change some things. And as one of the developers said, and I quote, "The port was done a long time ago as it was submitted for government approval in 2018, around the time of the government's reorganization. The government asked to change some game content a few months after, just some translations, nothing major, but we haven't heard anything back since then. We want the game to be released as much as everybody else, but it seems like it's stuck in government limbo for now." It's really hard to find any footage of it at all, and this 12-second clip is one of the only videos I could find during my research. Big Penguin Reflection. In the early versions of Sherbert Land, the big penguin on the center island used to have a reflection on the ice. Weirdly though, the reflection faces the wrong way. Off-roader can wall clip. Believe it or not, but the off-roader is actually capable of doing a wall clip. The Jack-Off Bridge. When Nathaniel Bandy uploaded his top 10 hardest Mario Kart Wii tracks video, he called the bridge on Maple Tree Way the Jack-Off Bridge. Yeah, I don't need to elaborate. Jet Bubble World Record. The Jet Bubble cart in Mario Kart Wii actually has a world record, and it's Coconut Mall, and it's unlikely that any other ones will get any other records. Flame Runner Centralization. For well over a decade now, players all across the community have come to a near unanimous conclusion that the Flame Runner is simply the best vehicle in the game. But what actually caused that? Is it the stats? Confirmation bias? No. The main point that a lot of competitive players make about why the Flame Runner is so prestigious boils down to the fact that it's just hard to counter something as good as the Flame Runner in the now 15 years that the game has been out. You'd think that by now people would be able to counter it, and some people are capable, but it will never be enough to truly dethrone it. The Flame Runner's dominance in the game is a combination of its stats, the fact that it basically has no equal, and how it's capable of doing things pretty much no other vehicle can. There have been conversations in the past about the Mach Bike and the Daisy Mach combo, but a lot of people consider it to be inferior to the one and only Flame Runner. Mushroom Gorge panels don't boost you. It's true. The boost panels in Mushroom Gorge don't actually boost you. What they're actually doing is slowing you down to a fixed speed so that you manage to hit the boost pad in a consistent fashion. Pause buffering. Pause buffering is a pretty self-explanatory term that can be abused in time trials. There's also something called home buffering, but that's a different thing altogether. This is prevalent in many different types of games, and Mario Kart Wii is not much different aside from what it's capable of. Pause buffering in Mario Kart Wii shortens the input range and can make it much easier to nail super tough tricks with better consistency. This can make it much easier to do things like chain wheelies, help with alignment-based tricks, precise stick movement, and really anything else that requires timing. For things like chain wheelies, you have a 6-frame window that is much easier to nail consistently, and pause buffering allows for the normal frame gap to go from 2 to 3 frames to 1 frame, making it more consistent to get the chains by abusing this. Obviously something like this that lets you heavily improve at timing strategies is questionable, and so pause buffering ended up being banned in time trials for CTGP. The decision sparks a lot of discussion about the validity of banning such a thing, as it can be argued that it's technically a feature in vanilla Mario Kart Wii, but that's a topic for a whole other video. If you want my opinion on it, banning it was the right choice as it would take a lot of enjoyment away from grinding time trials normally if all of the records started to become littered with pause buffering strats. Outside Drift Revolution. In 2022, a revolution was taking place in the Mario Kart Wii community about outside drifting bikes making a comeback. At some point in that year, people had realized that outside drift bikes were actually capable of some of their own things, like the Shy Guy Beach Ultra Shortcut World Record, where in this clip, only outside drift bikes can reach enough momentum to reach the key checkpoint to do the skip. But then it happened again on Luigi's circuit, when players figured out that you could clip into this wall, which was already known about, but the crazy part is that by driving all the way around the track like this, and then doing this at the very end, it allowed for this ultra shortcut to be possible with this task created by Jello Puff. But that's not even the coolest part of this. Pretty soon after these were discovered, players found something new about the slow wheelie glitch. The glitch had already been around for quite a while, but the way it works is if you did a half-speed wheelie off the track, it for some reason let you go right through walls without getting despawned in the process. This was already broken enough, but in comes an outside drift-only trick called the fast wheelie glitch. This one is pretty much exactly how it sounds. The tag is best performed with the Phantom bike, and for this version of it you have to be mostly facing the wall at a low speed, and face the bike upwards in order for the trick to work. This is the furthest anyone got with the trick, until someone named Epic95 figured out that if you drift during the fast wheelie glitch, you could still bypass the wall but end up going off the track with way more speed than normal. And to say this broke a lot of tracks is an understatement. The Phantom was literally drifting through out-of-bounds walls, and it was only a matter of time before it was used to break DS Airship Fortress, which it did in December of 2021 by Epic95, allowing for a 20-second lap. The last thing to mention about the outside drift revolution is a TAS-only trick called super hopping. Discovered by Monster in May of 2022, this TAS-only tech has the capability to level the playing field with inside drift vehicles, at least in tool-assisted runs. And as of the time of me making this video, it seems to have well established itself on the leaderboards as a trick that has once again completely broken the game. Getting stuck in a tree. In August of 2019, when Mr. Bean was doing a race on CTGP, this happened.
Oh, I'm a tree! I am a tree! Fuck, I'm a tree! Well, I'm a tree! I don't want to be a tree! No! How does no one ever know about this? What?
Waluigi Stadium is poorly designed. A lot of people in the Mario Kart community really don't like the design of Waluigi Stadium, and I'm one of those people too. At least from a casual standpoint, the map just flows like shit. There's also some turns that straight up suck in my opinion, and overall it's one of my least favorite tracks. The remakes weren't really well received either, but am I leaving something out of this or am I just hating? Let me know. The last Yoshi-themed course. In December of 2022, when ranking every Mario Kart Wii course, Shrafrillas said this about DS Yoshi Falls.
But by the standards of DS, it's a true embarrassment. So short and boring that it ended up being the last Yoshi-themed course in the series. No, seriously.
Then 2 months later, this happened. Well, that didn't age well, did it? DK Summit becomes clear. DK Summit is a really foggy map when you first start the race, but the fog slowly clears up over time as the race goes on. I'm gonna sit here and yap for a second so you can see it actually clear up more. Pretty cool. Harry Potter effect. The Harry Potter effect is a texturing glitch that happens in a lot of custom tracks that are made with the BRRES editor. The cause for this is actually quite simple. It happens when transparent polygons in the map file show up before the normal ones do. All Miis have the wrong stats. There's actually a mistake in the game's code that results in none of the Miis having the right stats. This ends up giving the small Miis the stats from Rosalina, the medium Miis the small Mii's intended stats, and the large Miis use the medium stats. Baby Peach and Daisy crown movement. When Baby Mario and Baby Luigi do tricks, their crowns move around as they're weighted to move when doing tricks. Thing is though, this is also in the game for Baby Peach and Baby Daisy, but it's just not used. Baby Peach and Daisy's crown is connected to the model's face bones, and since it's like that, it doesn't move in the game. Fixing this on the model itself looks like this, and why this is unused is not known. Tie bone leftover. Funky Kong's model has an extra bone named tie_1, which is taken directly from Donkey Kong's bone set, as Nintendo used him as a reference when making Funky Kong. The bone is animated for Funky Kong since he shares animations with Donkey Kong, but it's not actually on his model. DK Mountain Bridge Teleportation. The bridge on DK Mountain is buggy enough to where it can sometimes teleport people like this. CPUs drive backwards. The camera in the ending cutscene normally goes up like this, but by moving the camera in the ending sequence, we can see that the CPUs in this cutscene turn around and drive backwards. I don't know why Nintendo would do that, but they did. Lap Underflow. If you manage to drive backwards on the track for 32,768 laps, then the counter will go above 3. Can't skip 50cc credits. Yeah, it's true. You just can't skip it. Doesn't matter how many times you press the button, it does nothing. Korean font. In a folder named font.szs, there's 6 fonts that Mario Kart Wii uses. One of them, though, is only used in the NTSC-K version of the game, which uses a Korean font. Lost tournaments. When Nintendo still supported official servers, the online tournaments were in their heyday. Starting in May of 2008, 2 tournaments would be held each month, and all of them are still archived up until August of 2010. Everything past that are repeats of older tourneys, and if the entry isn't talking about lost official tournaments, I'm willing to bet that there's several tournaments on CTGP that have no existing footage. Marty Alternate Path. For many years, starting back in the days of Mario Kart 64, there were several rumors of an alternate path behind this thwomp, which people named Marty, on N64 Bowser's Castle. The thwomp itself is not only a different color than the other ones, but he'll also laugh at you if you get close enough to him. Marty's rise to popularity in the early 2000s was fueled by many different rumors, including one that hinted towards the idea of Marty being an unlockable character in Mario Kart 64. In mid-2007, there were apparent unlock methods on YouTube that would free Marty from the cage, but this all unfortunately turned out to be fake. The popular unlock video showed that if you drove around the Bowser statue, it would actually open the bars in front of the thwomp. The video, especially for 2007, is actually really well made, and I'm sure if I found this video growing up, I would have tried this for myself just like everyone else. Marty himself raises a lot of questions about why Nintendo decided to not only make him a standalone color, but also why they would put him behind what basically resembles a cell. As we all know now, Marty was never an unlockable character in any Mario Kart game thus far. His legacy, though, on the other hand, that will live on forever. Mii T-posing. If you use a heavy male Mii with either the Wario bike, Shooting Star, or Phantom with the Mii outfit A, it makes your character stuck in a T-pose. These are the only combinations that do this, and it's not understood why it happens. Last WFC race. The last ever race recorded on the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection was streamed live around a day after Nintendo shut it down. A Twitch streamer named Lepo was playing with 3 other people, and at this point, their race was the only worldwide one on the entire network. Once people in the community found the live stream, an ungodly amount of people gathered together to watch live the inevitable death of the official servers. This room was the last and only one left, and once the connection went dead after the 1v1 on Luigi circuit, that marked the official end of Vanilla Online. I wonder what it must have felt like to be the last people to ever play Mario Kart Wii on Nintendo's servers. That must be such an unrelatable feeling. James Charles was a hacker. Yeah, it's not a joke. In the early 2010s, James Charles used to be an intense grinder of Mario Kart Wii world records. He said before that he used to religiously play the game up until the servers shut down in 2014, but the videos aren't up anymore. Apparently he used to make Mario Kart hacking videos, and if he wasn't doing it for an unfair advantage competitively, it's more than likely that he used to be a world record holder in the past. The channel, Jay's Coding, still does have some videos up, but they're unrelated to Mario Kart. Mushroom Peaks theme. The song for Mushroom Peaks is a remix of the Forest Maze song from Super Mario RPG, and this is what it sounds like. World record failed due to earthquake. In October of 2019, a player named Cole, who now holds the world record for Luigi Circuit, failed a world record pace 3-lap record when an earthquake started happening out of nowhere. His monitor started shaking and it made him mess up a turn. And like, what are even the odds of that happening? There's not a clip of this happening, unfortunately, but this even happening alone is already a super unlikely scenario. I'd love to know what he was thinking in that moment. 3-wheeled vehicles. Mario Kart Wii only recognizes 3 different vehicle types. The karts get classed as 4-wheeled vehicles, the bikes get 2, but what about the Blue Falcon? Well, the Blue Falcon is the only 3-wheeled vehicle that there is, and while it does function the same as the karts do, it's technically classified in its own special category as a 3-wheeled vehicle. Mario Kart! There's a pretty rare soundbite that plays when one of Mario's title screen pictures shows up on the main menu. Third battle balloon. The battle menu in the game has 2 balloons, but when you actually play the game, there's 3. Well, it turns out that there actually are 3 on the menu, but the third balloon is just so incredibly small that it's almost impossible to notice in the menu. Someone's getting fired. Menu banner Japanese flash. When the game's logo flashes like this on the Wii menu, it actually shows the Japanese version of the logo on every single language except for Korean. You're not going to be able to unsee this after I show it to you, so you're welcome. Flameflyer was made for time trials. Nintendo definitely had no way of knowing how iconic the Flameflyer would be in the future of Mario Kart Wii, but this entry is partially a joke but also a prediction, simply based on the fact that this kart was kind of just meant to be as good as it is. Now the kart being made for time trials? I don't know about that. Desert Hills negative aura. Some people seem to think that DS Desert Hills has a very odd and quote, negative aura. This is most likely coming from a liminal standpoint, and I guess if you're doing time trials it can get pretty lonely, but I don't personally relate to this track's apparent liminality. The track by itself is a pretty deserted place though. Tournaments use beta tracks. A good portion of the tracks in the early tournaments for some reason use beta elements and also different fragments of their beta versions. Examples include this tree in Mario Circuit being 2D from a 2010 tournament, even though this is a 3-dimensional tree in the final track. This tourney from August 2008 featured 3 flags on the big shell in the background, which is not used in the finished track. And there were even changes in the item routing, with the first completion in December 2008 using this route instead of the normal one. It's kind of funny that the competition route is more simple than the used one. The last one I'll talk about are the placements of these flowers on Mario Circuit from February 2010. See that sunflower on the left? Well, that's where it was in this tournament. And this is its location on the final track. Somebody at Nintendo saw this flower and was like, you know what, actually, it needs to be moved. Why? Grumble Volcano Alt Shortcut. Everyone knows about the famous Ultra Shortcut on Grumble Volcano, but there's actually more than one. The other Ultra Shortcut is far less known about as it's not only slower but is also only possible on 200cc. The trick involves what you see on the screen now. Shortcuts that don't work. There's been a lot of theorized shortcuts in the past that have almost worked, but didn't due to checkpoint problems or have just become inferior to newer discoveries. I'm going to be honest here and say that I really couldn't find a solid example of a theorized shortcut that doesn't work due to these problems, and they absolutely exist though, and I would love to be educated about this in the comments. Rainbow Road Ultra performed online. Something really interesting about the way Rainbow Road's checkpoints work online is that if you're part of the first 6 people in a room, then if you fall off the track at this spot, then Lakitu will place you in the same spot you get placed in single player. But for some reason, if you're part of the last 6 people, it will instead drop you 1 checkpoint behind the one you would normally get dropped on, making it so that you can turn around, hit the key checkpoint, and have the lap count. That or this entry is talking about how somebody has done the much more iconic Ultra Shortcut in an online race. Ghost File Overflow. If you take longer than 5 minutes in a time trial with the Wii wheel, the ghost can't be saved as there's too many inputs to save the ghost. old main menu. This isn't the main menu, but there are unused button layouts that exist in the game files that look like this. I know how incredibly low quality these are, but they're the only ones I can get, but all of the images on screen are early versions of the UI that are present in the game's manual. They're all such minor changes, like slightly thinner fonts and buttons, but still changes nevertheless. Signs under palm trees. In the Wii and original versions of DS Yoshi Falls, if you look underneath the map and get a good look at the 2D background, for some reason there's signs under all of the trees. It's thought to be a graphical bug. Matsuoka's Shadow. There's a Mii of Shuzo Matsuoka, who's a retired Japanese tennis player and also the guy in the greatest motivational video of all time, that was sent out to all Japanese Wiis in 2007. It was most likely used as a placeholder, as this graphic is referenced a lot where the Mii head model shows up. But something interesting is that someone named B-Squo figured out that if you hover over a Mii, there's actually a silhouette of Matsuoka's Shadow being found out in January of 2022. All top players hate DK Snowboard Cross. From all the top players that I've spoken to, every single one of them has a deep hatred for Donkey Kong Snowboard Cross. Actually, you know what? Let me just get one of my friends who plays a lot of competitive to give his own opinion on it.
Mario Kart Wii is pretty known for having really jank physics, and DK Summit is no exception to it. There's a bunch of different places on the track that can be pretty inconsistent, like the turn out of cannon and last turn in specific, because they're both zipper turns. And at the same time, you have sub-pixel tricks like the mogul section if you want to go as fast as possible, which is pretty hard to be consistent online. Then lastly, you have the double shortcut, which is surprisingly one of the most consistent parts of the track, unless you're doing the Jimmy cut, which is, you really only see that in time trials. Overall, the track just has a bunch of inconsistent tech that makes it very challenging for online, but once you get it down, it's actually a pretty good track, but getting there is very difficult. Personally, I'm a big fan of DK Summit, but I could totally understand why, for a majority of the history of the game, people are not a big fan of DK Summit online, because there's just so many different things that can be very inconsistent when playing. I believe over time people have become more in favor of the track, but definitely 5 years ago or more, people weren't the biggest fans of it because of all the different strats there were that could just possibly be failed for no reason.
Wario Bike Super Gliding. In May of 2023, it was discovered that the Wario Bike does an incredible job of staying in the ground for the entire lap while having a speed of 120. This video by Monster demonstrates it beautifully. This entry also says super gliding, but I'm guessing that it's meant to say super sliding. Item box and ending. In the Sunset version of the Luigi circuit, there's a single item box floating way underneath the track. Funky Stadium Skybox. Funky Stadium is a completely indoor stage, but despite this, it still has a skybox on the outside. Luma dies in award ceremony. In the award ceremony cutscene, the Luma's eyes change texture, with some people making jokes about the texture change, which led to people making jokes about how the Luma is actually dead. Bowser's Castle Cannon. There's actually a destination point for a cannon that's right above the Bowser status on Bowser's Castle, with the cannon itself being impossible to activate in the game. It's thought to be an early design choice that they just forgot to remove. End-screen Mii oversight. The Mii's body in the ending screen of the game has a transparent square in its chest that's supposed to have a logo on it. It happens because the model that's associated with the Mii has a square polygon behind it that's using a texture that makes the polygon itself transparent. Race and Replay glitch. It's possible to race in replays by using a glitch that is activated by leaving the Quit Replay menu open for just long enough to where the game for some reason decides to let you race after enough time. In this glitchy state, there's no UI of any kind, which actually makes sense since the game doesn't load any of that in a replay, and every time you press 2 to exit the pause menu, holding it after you get back in is the only way to accelerate and really go anywhere. If you finish all 3 laps, then the game will appear normally until it has to show you things like your lap times and whatnot, but it doesn't. Now the game is soft locked and you are forced to reset. If you restart before finishing though, it still plays the replay, but it plays a replay of a race you never actually finished. It will also never finish the replay since, well, you never finished it yourself. Overall, a pretty interesting glitch, and I'll probably try it out for myself if I get bored enough. Minimap icons are bugged in live view. The way the icons look on the minimap are not how Nintendo intended for them to look. There's a bug in the game's code that makes the icons larger than they're actually intended to be. What happens is when the game is launched, they're set to their normal size, but since they're intended to be that big in time trials, when you exit time trials and go back, the icons don't get scaled back down unless you reset the game. Mission Game Mode 7. Every now removed mission objective still has at least some form of trace left in the game. The 7th game mode, though, has literally nothing left whatsoever. Unused Coconut Mall assets in Mario Kart 8. The Coconut Mall in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe reuses assets from Mario Kart Wii that went unused. This includes the picnic benches, and it also includes the 2 fruit stands on both sides of this image. Credit to Bisquo for finding this. King Boo SC glitch. For some reason, when you try to do the same character glitch with King Boo, it crashes the game for reasons that are extremely complicated. Basically, the game does a check for all the characters to see if they're a Mii, and if they are, then it assigns a Mii head to them during the award ceremony. This check runs as normal, but this check doesn't happen with duped characters, and instead what happens is that the game will just go ahead and do it anyway for duped characters, even if the characters aren't a Mii. The reason the game doesn't crash with other characters though is because every character has a bone in their model called face_1, but the one character that doesn't have it is, you guessed it, King Boo. The glitch has a couple more complications to it, but kudos to Bisquo on Twitter for really getting to the bottom of the root cause. 100cc hate hive mind. Most, if not all people who play Mario Kart Wii can all agree that 100cc is the least desirable mode in the game. Honestly though, I doubt I would have cared as a kid because sure, everyone likes to go fast and 150 is obviously superior, but there's definitely casuals who really wouldn't mind all that much. MVH Inverted Pyramid. Viewing Moonview Highway in a map editor shows this tiny speck far out of bounds from the track. Turns out that it's an inverted pyramid, and even weirder, it doesn't go with anything from the course model either. Missing Coconut Mall block. This piece of the wall on Coconut Mall is missing. And if you didn't know this, I don't blame you for it because I didn't either. Wall clips are intentional. Due to what makes wall clips work, what's happening during a wall clip is the direct result of the game trying to push you up and off of a wall. Normally when hitting a wall, the player gets knocked back like this. But if you manage to do it on a corner of a wall and not slow down, the result is, well, a wall clip. All the clips you've been seeing on screen are possible by bouncing off of the walls on various parts of the tracks. You not only get higher knockback when doing a wheelie, but you'll also get much greater airtime if you do a wall clip when you're already in the air. Basically, if it has a solid edge, it can be wall clipped. This also includes enemies and things like that too. So to conclude, the bounce back from hitting a wall is intentional, but I bet Nintendo didn't expect it to be possible to clip off a wall for insane airtime and all of the things that are possible with that. Stray pixels on title screen. For these 2 title screen pictures on the main menu, there's an unbelievably small mistake with them, and as you can probably guess, the pixels on the red circles are actually missing from the 2 pictures. I don't even understand how people find this kind of stuff. MVH's Japanese road propaganda. This entry might sound pretty far-fetched, but if you really think about the reasons for the roads being left-sided in Japan, it actually makes sense that they'd have a nod for what they'd consider the superior road system. The propaganda for left-sided roads is pretty far out there for something like a Mario Kart track, but when you consider that left-sided driving is partially rooted under the idea that most people are right-eye dominant, oncoming traffic being on the right side is actually something that is pretty reasonable for a road system. Maybe this is just a case of people looking way too far into something, or it really is just Nintendo poking fun at the many inferior road systems in places around the world like the USA. I mean, I drive on right-sided roads, so what do I know, right? DDR start line in tournaments. Every online tournament's minimap had an included starting line on the track graphic, but the only track that's excluded from this is Dry Ruins. It's actually for a pretty simple reason though, and it's that the track lacks the object that makes the starting line appear. Probably a glitch. Hop dodge loose definition. Hop dodging in the Mario Kart community has a very mixed definition, with hop dodging referring to two different tricks at the same time. This is still widely debated about to this day, and the Ace Attorney video that's been playing on screen is a pretty good example of this happening in a live conversation. Does it mean hopping and dodging? Does it not? I'll let you decide. I'll leave a link in the description to the whole video as it's pretty hilarious. Walmart is why Funky Kong was added. In June of 2021, Walmart Canada Gaming tweeted, "Remember when they added Funky Kong to Mario Kart Wii? That was awesome." And in true conspiracist fashion, this has led people to suspect that Walmart and Nintendo have a much closer relationship than either of the companies publicly admit. CTGP Police. On April 6th, 2022, Japanese player CeroC46 had the police raid his house when he was updating CTGP. I'm willing to bet that the chances of this are lower than when I won the lottery back in 2021. Losing racer commits suicide. The losing screen in the game has always been rather open to interpretation as to what happens beyond the single frame, and the fact that the characters are on a cliff have led people to interpret this ending as the racers committing suicide by jumping off the cliff. But that's obviously not true, right? Super grinding is an Easter egg. Just like with several other TAS-only tricks, super grinding is one that has a possibility to be an Easter egg by the developers, since I bet they thought that no one would ever be able to perform them. The sheer impossibility of the trick has led people to believe that super grinding might actually be an intentional Easter egg, but honestly, I really don't believe that, but I'm not going to stop people from believing what they want, so if you believe this, all the power to you. Troy caused cannon immunity removal. Cannon immunity refers to when you're unaffected by everything the game can throw at you when you're inside of any cannon on any track. And the famous BAM shock dodge video I mentioned earlier might actually be the reason that this feature has since been removed from every Mario Kart game to come after the Wii version. Is this a coincidence? Or did someone at Nintendo see the shock dodge video and make sure to tell the right people about it so that it could never happen again? The spear is the best vehicle. The spear is used in a lot of tool-assisted speedruns, and it has its proper place among the all-time greats like the Flame Runner and the Phantom. But why don't people use it in RTA? Well, some people are confident that one day it will dominate, as the reasonings for this vehicle being one of, if not the best vehicle, is due to the fact that it's so dominant in tool-assisted runs, so who's to say that it won't become the new meta in the future? Also, another reason is that this bike is, quote, the best vehicle in the game, but everybody sucks at using it. Magic Cruiser is a dead Kamek. When looking at the Magic Cruiser, it really does just look like a dead Kamek turned into a bike. I'll leave this one open to your interpretation though. Is it fake? Is it taxidermy? I'll let you decide. Mr. Bean is a Nintendo employee. Mr. Bean 35000 VR has been making revolutionary changes and discoveries in the Mario Kart Wii community for as long as the game has been out. His technical knowledge and many years of experience makes him probably the closest person to a Panenkoic 2012 of Mario Kart Wii. So what does this have to do with him being a Nintendo employee? Well, Mr. Bean's widespread knowledge and veteran status of the game has made some people skeptical about whether or not he has insider knowledge on a level that nobody else does. But hold on. Why would a seemingly random person from the UK have insider knowledge about something that's made by a Japanese family-owned company? It's just not true. Or is it? Mario Kart Black is official. Mario Kart Black is a custom texture pack that was initially created by Rubits in October of 2010. It changes all the track's visuals entirely and is the successor to Custom Mario Kart Wii, another texture pack. But as for them being official, well, that's not true at all. It's just a joke. Bowser Bike True Meaning. From all the information I was able to gather about this entry, I have come to the conclusion that the creator of this Iceberg put this entry here as a joke. The Bowser bike itself is literally just what the Flame Runner is called in the British English version of the game. The Shock is Funky Kong's alter ego. In this Funky Kong Sounds video that was uploaded in 2019, a commenter left a very interesting theory he had about what Funky Kong is actually saying. To paraphrase word for word this hilarious comment, this is going to be hard to say without laughing, but alright, here we go. I invented a whole storyline around 25 seconds. I thought he was saying, "The Shock!" And I imagine the Shock is Funky Kong's alter ego who's really good at racing, has superpowers of some sort, and is triggered in the same way Shazam is. If you combo right, it sounds like he's exclaiming how he's not the Shock, "I'm not!" Which I thought would be like Clark Kent saying he's not Superman. On the subject of Superman, I made Toadette his Lois Lane, and Baby Luigi his successor. Donkey Kong, nicknamed Dong, kept getting hit by all colors of shell, and Wario is supposed to be some kind of mafia boss, but I beat the game before I could develop their characters. Also, the Shock's nemesis is supposed to be Reality, but I never even figured out who Reality was. After Mario Kart Wii, the Shock became so good at racing that he ascended beyond time, and that's why we haven't seen him in any other Mario Kart since. Nobody is supposed to say the Shock, or he will attack from the beyond and mess up whatever you're doing. Synopsis. Dong got sniped? The Shock. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Lizard Wizard 641, wherever you are, I hope you're doing great. Ending credits frame 2160. On frame 2160 of the ending credits video, there's a single frame that shows a close-up shot of Koopa Troopa's low poly model. It's worth noting that the models switch from low to high poly when the camera is far away versus being close. Again, I don't even understand how people find this stuff. Missing competition text. There's an ultra-rare bug that makes it so that there's no text on the competition's word box. The only video of this bug's existence is from a YouTube video from October 2009. The game wasn't modified in any way, and to this day, nobody knows why it happens. NOE03. Appearing in top 10 track leaderboards when the game first launched back in 2008, there's been an ongoing mystery surrounding this player right here on the very bottom. Who is NOE, and why is this important? Well, it's thought to be somebody at Nintendo, with the acronym apparently meaning Nintendo of Europe. These leaderboards are also not the only place where they show up. In an official Italian video for the Wii, NOE shows up again, this time being named NOE Mac. It's not known if this was ever an average player, or if it was a Nintendo employee, and ever since B-Squo on Twitter brought it to light, it still remains a mystery to this day. Cowboy Jed's true identity. You know, I really want to be in the belief that we have absolutely no idea who Cowboy Jed is, but as mentioned way earlier in the video, we now know that the person who played Cowboy Jed is an Australian man named Gibson Nolt, who by the way has the worst Twitter picture I've ever seen. It's not even close. Anyway, aside from the trauma I endured by seeing his Twitter picture, hopefully more people get wind of Cowboy Jed's legendary true identity. Every ultra shortcut has been discovered. Following the discovery of the newest shortcut on Moo Moo Meadows in February of last year, it is more than likely that this will probably be the last ultra shortcut ever discovered. Why? Well, honestly, there's just not really many ideas left for them. Every, if not all of the tracks have been reverse engineered to their limit, and unless new strategies are discovered, we've pretty much reached the ceiling for ultra shortcuts in Mario Kart Wii. There have been some new discoveries in as recent as August, but aside from that, all of the strategies have hit their genetic limit. But you know what? I've been proved time and time again that this game still has so much history behind it, so I'm just going to sit back and wait to be proven wrong. Karts will eventually be better than bikes. For the nearly 2 decades that Mario Kart Wii has been out, the competitive scene has been strictly dominated by nothing but bikes. We all know why that is from a technical standpoint, but what about the karts? There's some tech to be discovered with them, right? Well, maybe, but until there is, Funky Kong with the Flame Runner will continue to reign supreme on nearly every competitive category there is. We might see an eventual shift to bikes like the Spear, as they have potential as being even better than the Flame Runner, and maybe in a very long time from now, people will start to master super grinding. But until that happens, Funky Kong's legendary combination will always be superior for as long as the game is alive. Well, that's about everything. You've made it to the very bottom. Congrats! Well, this video took me an extremely long time to make. You know, every time I say I want to make a shorter video, I end up not making a shorter video and instead end up making a video that's so long that I really can't justify how long they take to make anymore. That isn't to say I didn't enjoy making this video, because this was really fun to make. I learned a hell of a lot of things about Mario Kart Wii that I would have never had any idea for probably as long as I lived. I do think I need to get some rest though, because I can start to feel my fingers falling off, so I think I'm going to give them some rest. If you like the video and you want to see more of my Nintendo content, or even just Icebergs, then make sure to check out the other videos on my channel. You should also definitely subscribe, as I want to hit 100,000 subscribers, at least before I die. That would be nice. Yeah, I really don't have much else to say, so enjoy the outro, and I hope you learned something new. Goodbye.